Welcome to Why Such a Fuss, an exciting new channel dedicated to help individuals and businesses to learn more about data protection in a way that is easy and engaging. I'm Christina from CVG Solutions, and I am a fully qualified data protection professional. I am passionate about educating, empowering, and enabling businesses to thrive. Remember to like and subscribe to this channel and help us to spread the word. Data protection is there for a reason. It protects you, your family, loved ones, customers, employees from coming to harm through the use of personal data. So make sure you click subscribe. Now, get ready to embark on a journey of growth and knowledge as we dive into the world of data protection. I've invited Annie McNeely, who is an ISO 9001 implementer and auditor, to today's podcast because I've noticed recently that there is a big push for B-Corp certifications. And so I wanted to explore this topic in more details because I think there is confusions out there. There are business coaches that are working with organizations, and as part of helping the organization to grow, and so they help them to build their business strategies, they also include B Corp as part of that growth. And so when I challenge them, I say, well, what's wrong with the ISO standards? They can't really justify that. The sort of response is, well, I thought it's good for the business. So I put it in the stride. So they don't actually understand what it is.
Or why they're doing it.
So that question, for me, that questions the coach for a starter. Because obviously you're not doing your job right in terms of you're advising me to do something, but you understand why you're advising me to do that. But again, there is also confusion in businesses. So I wanted to tackle this with you, Annie, because obviously with your ISO expertise, and also because I worked for BSI, who is the organization that developed and still develops the standards. So now there are rumors out there that apparently B Corp is more internationally recognized than the ISO. I have my doubts. So, Annie, welcome to the show. Let's start with the ISO, shall we? Why do we have them? How did they come about? That kind of,
So and you touched on something there that I think is really important. The first question that a business needs to ask themselves is, what are we trying to achieve with a certification, whether it's B Corp or ISO or investors in people or whatever it is? What's their ultimate aim in getting that certification, right? That's question number one. And the answer could be, or depending on the answer, that may rule one out and rule another one in, or it could be that you need both, right? But you need to understand what it is you're trying to achieve as a business, fundamentally. And a lot of businesses don't really have much of an answer. They might have part of the answer to that, but often they don't have much of an answer. It's just kind of, well, we kind of think like we need to do it, or everyone else has got it, or, something along those lines. And bearing in mind,
my coach told me to do it.
My coach told me to, or my consultant said so. Bearing in mind, of course, that obtaining these certifications takes time, it takes money, it pulls out your resources. It's not an insignificant undertaking. So that said, the other point to make is I personally don't work with B Corp. I do work with ISO, and I do non-ISO quality management stuff as well. But like you, I come across it and people ask me about it. And sometimes in general conversations in business context, people say, what do you think of B Corp? Which one should I go for, etc. So I do come across it. Now, I think there are a few key points around ISO 9001, which is the quality management standard, which that's the one that I focus on. The first point to make there is that it is undoubtedly internationally recognized. It's the foundation of supply chain assurance globally. And I would be very surprised if B Corp, now how do they measure that? Who knows? But I would be very surprised if B Corp in the actual in the supply chain context is more recognized than ISO 9001 because of its reach. Which brings me to the next point. And the reason it has so much reach partly is because it's been around for a long time. So the ISO 9001 standard in its current form, barring the sort of regular revisions and updates and stuff, it was first published in 1987 as an ISO standard. So that's a good track record right there. But even before that, there was a British standard, which was BS 5750, and that was developed into the ISO 9001 standard. And the BS 5750 goes back to the 50s when the UK and the US governments were involved in military procurement activities, and there were so many different standards that all kind of overlapped and had similar aims. They consolidated and streamlined and simplified down to a standard, which was the BS 5750. So since the 1950s, a quality management standard in some form or other has been active throughout international and global supply chains, and it has then developed over the decades into what we now see as the ISO 9001 standard. That's a long and very well established track record.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's recognized across multiple sectors. Doesn't matter the size of the business or anything like that. It has massive reach and huge applicability, especially since the last revision.
It's also international in Europe. There is a lot of ISO certification, not just the 9001, but
over 1 million.
Over
1 million ISO. Then that's just 9001, and then you've got 14 and 27 and 45 and it's huge. It's huge. And those more than 1 million ISO 9001 certifications are spread across something like 127 different countries, something like that. I mean, so it is truly an international or a global standard. Now, in terms of its function, and when I say function, I mean what it's designed to do as opposed to why people choose to do it, because those are two different things quite often. But fundamentally, its function is to help a business achieve operational excellence, so that that the operational end of their business is constantly improving, is constantly, consistently meeting the needs of stakeholders and building on that all the time, so that customer satisfaction is never negatively impacted and indeed increases and improves. So it's very operationally focused. Now, B Corp, on the other hand, and I've got their explanation here, or the B Lab explanation of what B Corp is about. And B Lab is the non-profit organization. It's kind of the equivalent of the ISO or the British Standards Institute, but for B Corp. So B Lab describe, or they say that certified B corporations are businesses that meet the highest standards of verified, and here are the key words, social and environmental performance, public transparency, and legal accountability to balance profit and purpose. So the focus is social and environmental. And in the shorthand of that is that it indicates a business's ethics, really, to its customers. Now, there's a little bit of overlap insofar as it mentions their legal accountability. Now, ISO 9001 requires that the business complies with all statutory and legal requirements. Statutory regulatory requirements must be met. That's a baseline as part of getting your ISO 9001 certification. You could argue that any business should be doing that anyway, of course, but a standard puts mechanisms in place to ensure that happens. And then, of course, the auditing process is like a double check on that. So there's a little bit of overlap there. And these days, the 9001 standard does have a section in it where it requires you to consider climate change. So there's a little bit of environmental overlap there, but the focus is still very much on your operations, whereas B Corp is focused on social and environmental aspects of your business.
Yeah, but doesn't, but in terms of the ISO standards, there is the 14,001 standard.
Yeah, absolutely. There are specific standards which cover
the
environmental. Yes, very much so. And indeed, other elements of your business like diversity and inclusivity and things like that.
Yes.
So yeah, everything, you could make the case that everything that B Corp encompasses can also be covered by an ISO standard.
Yeah.
The question is, as a business, are you looking to improve your operations with those things in mind? Or are you looking to, is it more about just confirming to your clients that you have those things kind of front and center in terms of how you operate your business? Are you doing it to attract people into your business? Are you doing it because your sector is particularly sensitive to those issues? These are the sorts of questions that need to be asked to help determine, is that going to be more benefit, or indeed should we have both?
Yeah,
you could make doing both.
As a business in the UK, so say UK business, if you say that I'm quite conscious in terms of social and environmental aspect, ISO 14001 does that. Okay.
Yes.
That. As well as B Corp. So why should I go for B Corp, which is an American standard, is not a British standard, so not a European standard, and not for the 14001, which is it's been around a lot longer for a starter.
Yeah.
It's much more internationally recognized. Right? It's British, it's European. This is what I'm operating. Why should I be going for an American
B Corp?
That is literally probably So
it's a good question, and it's a difficult one to answer for me because and admittedly, I'm probably slightly biased because I'm more immersed in the ISO world. But having said that, implementing an ISO standard is, if you're doing it right, is quite far reaching, and the tendrils kind of reach into the whole business, and it can, at least in the first instance, increase workloads, and it builds a level of bureaucracy that maybe wasn't there before. And so it's a real step up or a maturation process when you start putting ISO systems into a business. My sense is, and again, I'm not an expert in B Corp, but my sense is that the implementation of B Corp is less demanding, which is not to say that it's not as valuable. I'm not trying to say that, but the sort of practicalities of implementing B Corp, because it's narrower in its focus, the practicalities of that maybe aren't as demanding. And also, I think there is an element, because its focus is social and environmental, and of course, everyone's becoming more aware of these things. The whole world is becoming more aware of those factors, and the business world for sure. And this B Corp was founded in 2006, which shows the difference in terms of age, of how long it's been around. There's a lot of hype around environment and social responsibility. There are trends around environment and social responsibility. There are undoubtedly sectors that, as I say, are particularly tuned into those things. And so I suspect to some extent the decision is led by that context. Where in a manufacturing context, ISO is the buzzword, and because it has been for decades, it's established, and you almost have to have it in some sectors because everyone else has it. And if you don't have it, you're not competing. And I'm sure there is a similar effect around B Corp, but at the moment it's more limited because it's still growing, and the focus on environment and things.
And the other difference is that with the ISO stands, any of them, you have an external auditor that comes in and sort of assess you, and that's how you get your certificate.
Yeah.
With the B Corp is self-certification.
Yeah.
So to
Very
me,
different in that regard, yes.
so there is a weaker, because of bias, there is a weaker
Yeah,
process.
it's not as robust, arguably, in
Yeah.
terms of how it's assessed, and indeed in the ISO world, although there's nothing in the standard that says you can't do your own auditing, and bigger companies will do their own internal auditing.
Yes.
Even the internal auditing, it's best practice to not do that yourself because you shouldn't mark your own homework, and
Yeah.
and of course that external audit is the most rigorous approach.
Yes.
Anything which is self-governing or self-assessed, you'd be hard pressed to argue that that is or can be as robust as something where an independent third party is making the assessment. 100%. Yeah. So yeah, you could argue that that's a weakness. On the other hand, you could argue that it kind of maintains a degree of momentum if they're doing it internally themselves. I'm trying to play a little bit sort of, be fair to both
Yes.
where I can be. But yeah, as a general rule, if you want impartiality and you really want to get to the bottom of anything that needs to be improved or fixed or what have you, you need that third party input.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You need to sort of neutral.
Yeah.
Body.
And that comes back again to the implementation not being as demanding.
Yeah.
If what you're implementing is going to be scrutinized by a centralized, centrally controlled third party before you can even get certified, then by its nature, the implementation process has to be very effective as well. So,
yeah. So, and would you say that the B Corp or ISO is more suitable for smaller businesses and one more for larger businesses, or really it doesn't matter?
No, I on that particular front, I would say it doesn't matter. Now, the difficulty, certainly where ISO is concerned, for a small business, is the amount of work that it involves. Albeit with a small business, there's less to implement, but there are fewer people to support the implementation as well. So it's hard work for a small business, but it certainly shouldn't be a deciding factor as to whether they get certified with that or with that. It still needs to be a case of what are we trying to achieve and which standard is going to give us the best, the benefit that we're looking for. And if ISO ticks the boxes, then ISO it should be, and vice versa. So no, I wouldn't say that one or the other is better for a bigger or a smaller business. It's really about what's the intention in getting that certification.
Yeah, I mean, I will say it that ISO standards are much more recognized, certainly by public bodies, and
yes,
yes, and also internationally. B Corp A is an American standard, so be aware of that. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. I'm just saying be aware that it is an American standard, it's not a UK or European standard. So if your target audience is in Europe, then the ISO are much more suitable for you. So you need to think about all of those elements. Yes. Wow.
Now, it'll be interesting to see, because of course one of the reasons, as I said before, that ISO is so recognized is that it's had time to build that traction and to expand and to build awareness and so on. So they've got a massive head start.
Yes.
And so it would be interesting to sort of look, I don't know, like 50 years into the future and see if B Corp has managed to establish itself to the same degree and therefore has the same level of recognition and awareness and so on. Because time does play a factor in that. And of course, the reason that it's recognized in public sector is because it's been around forever. So, but yeah, certainly at this point in time, I would love to see the stats that say that B Corp is more internationally recognized. It might be in a very certain sector if you're talking about large PLC corporations with, also I don't know what the context would be, but I can't imagine that across the board it is more recognized than ISO. I just find that very difficult to believe.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. But even the large corporation that I worked for, the all being with ISO, because especially if they're working with other big businesses like big insurances or banks or public sector, they're all demanding ISO. There is no B-Corp.
It wouldn't surprise me if those organizations going forward decide to adopt B Corp as well.
Yes.
Because it's a particular flag to
100%.
social and environmental. That wouldn't surprise me. They use 9,000 to manage the operations and supply chain and quality, and then they add the B Corp in terms of sort of people and ethics and so on.
Yes.
But yeah, if it's a case of one or the other.
Yeah, but then it's interesting because at the very beginning we said that there was a lot of different standards, and the UK and the US got together and created the BS, whatever number it was. So now we're seeing the split again.
Yeah. It's doing this again, and at some point it'll have
at some point they're gonna get together again, and we're gonna have, I don't know, D-Corp or something.
Yeah. What I don't know, and I would be interested to know, is what was the driver behind setting up B Corp?
Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, the context makes sense, like I say, because awareness around environmental concerns and social responsibility were growing and becoming more, moving to the forefront in business terms. What was the driver behind creating a specific certification for that? I'd be interested to know. Maybe they felt there wasn't anything focused enough or sort of visible enough to send that message to a market. I don't know. I'd be interested.
I don't know, because the ISO 14001 does that. That's the same. So I wonder whether it's because the Americans, because this is North America, they wanted to have their own. It's like SOC 2 versus ISO 27001.
Yeah. And actually, if you look at the distribution of ISO 9001 certifications globally, America, or the United States, I should say, is surprisingly low in terms of the number of certifications in that country. I don't think they're even in the top 10 in terms of the number of certifications, which people might find surprising. But I do, as you say, I wonder if there's a slightly more kind of insular approach to how they assess things within the United States, and that's one of the drivers behind B Corp, maybe, rather than adopting something that's already internationally available. So it looks like that sometime in the past they consolidated the standards, and now we're going the other way with it. Because we already see in the IT environment, we already got two separate certification, SOC and ISO 27001, which they're actually doing or trying to achieve the same thing. So again. And the whole point of ISO is that it's international. That's the whole point, is that it's international standards. It's an interesting one, but time will tell. We'll see. I have had a few people in the last 12 months say to me, what are your thoughts on B Corp and which one should I do? But the answer to that is, well, what are you trying to achieve?
Yes. Simple as that. Yeah,
that's the starting point every time.
Yes, absolutely.
Well,
Annie, once again, thank you for joining me today. A pleasure.
You're welcome.
As always. Would you like to let our audience know how to get in touch with you should they wish to explore more quality management? And
absolutely. So you can always find me on my website, which is www.anniemcneely.co.uk. And you can find me on LinkedIn. Just look up Annie McNeely. You will find me, and my banner says founder of ISO Club. So track me down.
Fantastic. And if you would like to get in touch with me and find out about GDPR, the data protection, you can again find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Just search for CVG Solutions. Alternatively, email me at info@cvgsolutions.co.uk. Thank you for listening, and remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe.